With miles upon miles of snow, dirt, and emptiness, the Arctic, Antarctic, and other places of cold are truly lonely places. However, beyond that loneliness is mystery, tragedy, and speculation. Welcome to the 10-episode series where I will be covering the most bizarre instances and mysteries that have ever haunted these places. I am your host, Kryptic, and for today, we will be narrating 3 stories related to this topic. All of these stories come from the Let's Not Meet subreddit. I will be reading these stories along with a very special guest, Happy Shadows. I absolutely recommend looking at his videos and showing him some support, as I feel he really deserves it. A link to his channel will be in the description below. Now, with introductions aside, prepare to be frozen in time. When I was 27, I lived in Novosibirsk, Siberia, for 8 months. I happened to be there for their coldest winter in 40 years, and along with the mountains of snow piled up along every street, there was also at least 3 inches of ice on all of the sidewalks, which made walking a challenge. I was at a friend's apartment one night for a party, and I stayed there much later than I should have. It was after midnight when I decided to leave, and I had to walk home because I didn't have a car. I only lived about 15 minutes away, which wasn't a big deal in the daytime, but late at night it was pretty dangerous to be out alone. I decided to risk it though, and I left their building and walked to the crosswalk to get to the main street. As I was crossing the road, I noticed a man coming toward me on my left. He was staggering around like he was drunk, and I knew that he would be right behind me when I reached the sidewalk. Sure enough, I could hear him following me, and then I heard him speed up and walk faster. From his steps and the way he was breathing, I could tell he was trying to catch up to me, but I couldn't pick up speed because the ice was too slippery, and I didn't want to fall. I concentrated as hard as I could on his breathing and the ice in front of me when I heard the most wonderful sound in the world: him falling. He had gotten really close behind me when his feet slipped out from under him, and he fell backward onto the sidewalk. That was the first and last time I had ever praised God for all of the ice, and I picked up my pace as best as I could so I could put enough distance between myself and my potential assailant before he climbed to his feet. He didn't come after me after that, and I made it home without incident. Needless to say, I never went out that late ever again.
Okay, so I used to live next to a homeless shelter in downtown Boston, and after living there for a few months, I got accustomed to how things ran down there. At dusk, the shelter would open up, and they would fill the beds. Whoever was outside of the building when the beds filled up was not let in, and unfortunately had to go it alone that night. There were usually around 10 people left, but some nights there could be 25 outside. So all that being said, my late night encounters have been regrettably frequent, and I usually end up not being able to sleep. One encounter in particular I will never forget. It was pretty late that night. I was walking back from my friend's apartment in North End, and was trying to make it back quickly because it was fucking freezing. Mid-January in New England can be really brutal, and Boston has its fair share of wind tunnels. When I had left the apartment, it had just started to snow. It was well past midnight on a weekday, and the city was barren. By the time I had made it halfway, there was already a half foot of snow. My mark was the 7-Eleven in the theater district. Once I saw that fluorescent green and white sign, I was there. My apartment was a block away, so I trucked along with my head down to avoid the sharp and cold wind. I turned down one of the more major streets on my way home when the wind picked up like a banshee. I decided to take the alleys to avoid the wind because it felt like it could break my nose off. So, off I go, into the alleyway, where the wind was non-existent. There was even heat coming out of the vents behind the buildings, and I really thought I had made the right choice. Now, 5 seconds into the alleyway, I hear something in front of me, followed by a quiet laugh. However, the laugh didn't stop and just grew louder, until this guy stepped out from behind a caged generator. This guy was straight out of a nightmare, tall, at least 6'8", and skinny, to the point where he could be starved. He was completely bald, and wore a ripped blue sweater, and walked with his arms contorted, his fingers flicking vigorously, and this black shit all over his mouth. He mumbled something, then laughed. Mumbled, laughed, and continued. I couldn't hear what he was saying, and I don't think it would have made any sense regardless. He wasn't looking at me either. This guy was in his own world, and it felt like I was standing there for way too long, so I decided to leave with haste. I pivoted and speed-walked back the way I came. I exited the alley and turned down the frozen hell of a street again. Halfway in my face, couldn't take it anymore, and I flipped around and started to walk with my back against the wind, checking periodically for my turn. As I reached the end of the street, I walked quietly backwards, still to avoid the cold. My hood was on and I had no peripherals. Suddenly the guy walks right to the left of me, an arm's length away, doing his same routine. The guy was barefoot in a snowstorm and made eye contact with everything but my eyes, so I turned and booked it with my head down. I knew the way. I just wanted to see that 7-Eleven, and eventually I did. I ran inside to get warm and catch my breath. The Indian guy at the counter said something about the weather, but I just kept my head down. When I caught my breath, I said goodbye to him and left. With my hood up, I walked to my apartment building, and before I reached the steps, I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, standing under the glow of the 7-Eleven sign. He looked at me, the wind kicking up the snow all around him. I turned to put the key in the door, and he started towards me as fast as he could. He had a serious kink to his step, and I had already opened the door. I was in. I headed upstairs and shut my window. I didn't bother looking outside because I just wanted to forget. I never saw him again.
I realize some people will question if this is true or not, and I can understand that. It's so bizarre and surreal that it seems to be the result of an overactive imagination, not an actual real-life thing. Believe what you will, this is what happened. I live and work in the very north of Scandinavia. I'm from the Sami people, and my family always lived the traditional Sami life, until it simply wasn't possible anymore. Then the family farm turned into a tourist attraction. Its biggest hit among the visitors was the dog sled experience. We would take them out in the evening for a tour with the dogs, show them the stunning aurora borealis, and stop somewhere for coffee and traditional food cooked over a campfire. One afternoon, one of the guests didn't show for the ride, and the others went ahead without him. It was my day off, and I was surprised to see this foreign guest hanging around the property. Why had he decided not to go on the tour with the rest? He was the only one traveling alone, a bit shy and silent, and looked very lost.
I forgot the time.
He explained to me, looking very disappointed that he missed out on the highlight of the trip to this exotic place.
I promised everyone at home to show them a video of this, but now it will never happen.
He sighed, and I felt sad for him. He was from Japan and saved money for a long time to come here, and now he was missing out. Okay, I'll take you on a tour. After all, he had paid a lot to get to go, so why not? Since the real dog sled was already out, I offered to show him how to use a kickspark so we could take one each and go for a ride. It was a beautiful cold night, and when we stopped for coffee we saw the spectacular Aurora Borealis. At that moment, something strange happened, and this polite, shy man started to be really, really flirty. Suddenly, he tells me that the god of the wilderness had spoken and that we were meant to be. I freaked the fuck out and told him to stop that nonsense. He did not. Instead, he grabbed my hand and pulled me close, trying to kiss me. I thought he must be psychotic, and the fact that we were out in the middle of nowhere, far from people, dawned him away. But he held onto my arm and started to try to reach for my scarf. He went on about how he had always dreamed of coming here to find his wife, and that he had now decided that I was the one. When he tried to throw me down in the snow, I screamed, and before he could react, Laika, my husky, had attached herself to his arm and hung on for dear life. The man started to cry and tell me that he was lonely and wanted to marry me and have a lot of kids. I told him I don't want a marriage or any kids, and absolutely not with him. I also explained that I was going back now, and if he wanted he could follow, or if he preferred he could lie down and wait for the cold of the Arctic to claim his life. The wolves could do with a treat. During the ride back, I contemplated if I should report this incident to the police or not. You need to realize that the police in the area are pretty much non-existent, and something like this would not conjure much action from anyone. So I didn't. Once we came back, the man got into the kickspark and started walking towards the main road and the bus stop to take the bus back to the nearest village. I didn't bother telling him that he would have to wait for a long time for the bus to stop there, and no one would pick up a hitchhiker here either. To all the creepy, overly lovesick people out there, never try and be violent with a woman who is a pack leader of a team of huskies. They might look nice and sweet, but trust me, mess with their owner, and you get the teeth in the blink of an eye.